Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
General Hospital spoilers for Monday, November 17th, reveal Britt Westbourne will manhandle Emma Scorpio Drake while Laura Collins has a public meltdown. Giovanni Gio Palmieri will also confess to Brooklyn Quartermaine, so let's bandy all the drama ahead. At GH, Britt will snare Emma, who'll snap at her on Monday's occasion. Emma will advise Britt to get off her, but Britt will refuse to let her go until they get many effects straight. Now that effects have turned disastrous for Rocco Falconeri in court, Britt will lash out and maybe charge Emma of being the ringleader of this whole lab-breaking campaign. As for Gio, he'll admit to Brooklyn that he's the reason Rocco broke into the lab. Gio will take responsibility for dragging Rocco into this mess, but Brooklyn may assure him and try to soften the blow of Dante Falconeri's brewing wrathfulness. Over with Lulu Spencer, she'll grow concerned about Rocco facing a captivity judgment unless she does commodity drastic. Lulu will complain to Carly Spencer about Rocco being framed since the lab break heft wasn't as bad as Professor Henry Hank Dalton made it feel. Will Lulu want Carly to ask Jack Brennan for a favor? Brennan frequently serves as Mr. Fix-It when it comes to Carly's loved bones. So she may agree to see what he can do. As for Laura, she'll have a veritably public meltdown as people gather around her with cell phone cameras. It looks like Laura will rain Dalton and call him a fabricator now that he's presented bogus substantiation to ADA Justine Turner. In Alexis Davis's office, Rick Lansing will admit he's trying to make peace with Sonny Corinthos and suggest perhaps it's time to do the same with Alexis. Next, Curtis Ashford will have a tense discussion with Portia Robinson, who'll wonder if he's about to suggest they stay together for the baby's sake. It's possible Stella Henry's rearmost speech will get through to Curtis. Trina Robinson's pressure could also be a factor, so there's a chance Curtis might consider trying again with Portia. Of course, Portia may have reservations considering Curtis' egregious interest in Jordan Ashford and incapability to stay down from her. General Hospital spoilers say Curtis, Portia, and Jordan will have a lot to figure out, so we'll bring you updates on any other love triangle news. Carly Spencer lashed out at Lucas Jones, while Stella Henry dragooned Curtis Ashford. Plus, Trina Robinson brazened Jordan Ashford and Rocco Falconeri was framed. Carly lashed out at Lucas. Lucas met with Carly and Jocelyn Jacks at Bobby's to partake his instigative news that he and Marco were going to live together. Carly was surprised and doubtful if he was ready for such a big change, but she was willing to help them find a place until Lucas mentioned they were moving into Windmere. That made her pass to stop it. Lucas reminded her that it was his choice. And he argued it was a good way for him and Marco Rios to test living together before getting their own apartment. Carly argued Marco's father is dangerous. Carly argued that Jen Sidwell was a trouble, having preliminarily blown up Charlie's cantina. Lucas replied that there was no substantiation of that, so she refocused out what the villain had done to Anna Devane, Jason Morgan, and Lucky Spencer in Africa. When Lucas tried to liken Sidwell to Sonny, Carly came indeed more worried. She angrily stated that her family was trying too hard to prove something. Jocelyn tried to calm her mother down. Jocelyn tried to soothe her mama, but Lucas pushed Carly to express her passions. She refocused out that, at best, Marco was just as deceived as Lucas regarding his father's business. But at worst, he was taking advantage of Lucas due to his ties with her and Sonny Corinthos. Lucas felt hurt that she misdoubted Marco's love for him. Carly advised him against making that mistake and looked to Jocelyn for support. But Jocelyn argued that Lucas should have the freedom to make his own choices and that they should back him up. Lucas was appreciative of Jocelyn's support. Lucas valued her support and said, "Don't worry, sis. You don't have to visit. And I don't need your blessing to be happy." With that, he left angrily. Carly was hurt by Lucas's passions towards her. Jocelyn offered to help mend effects, but Carly expressed her disappointment in Joss too. Wanting Lucas to connect with Sidwell for her WSB design, Jocelyn tried to play down the situation, but Carly claimed that she understood better than anyone how dangerous Sidwell could be. Stella pressured Curtis at a near table. Stella prompted Curtis to partake his studies with her. When he said he didn't want to talk about what was bothering him, she replied, "Too bad. I know that you and Portia Robinson are awaiting a baby." She explained how she figured it out and couldn't understand why he'd hide similar great news from her. Curtis confessed it was complicated because he and Portia were in the process of getting a divorce. Stella proposed they consider comforting, as they had 6 or 7 months to attune before the baby arrived. Curtis felt the baby didn't change anything, but she claimed that it changed everything. Stella didn't want Curtis to miss a second chance at fatherhood. She didn't want him to miss an alternate chance to be a father and raise a child from birth. Curtis clarified that he planned to, but not while still married to Portia. Stella contended that their child merited both parents in their life and remained hopeful they could resolve their issues. Curtis gently reminded his aunt that this decision was hers to make, and he and Portia had agreed to separate. He refocused out that numerous separated parents successfully raised children, but Stella maintained they demanded to try again and prompted him to fix his marriage or threat lamenting it later. Trina commended in Ava when Trina failed to answer her work question at the gallery. Ava Jerome tasted that her friend was troubled and encouraged her to partake her passions. Trina bared that her parents were decoupling, expressing confusion over her emotional response since she hadn't endured them together during her parenting. Nonetheless, Trina noted that she could see the love between them and maintained that their separation wasn't simply due to growing piecemeal, but rather told by external factors. Just also, Sidwell came with Marco and Jordan to accept Ava's assignation to view some art, while Trina shot a light at Jordan. Ava complimented Marco on Lucas moving in with him, and he was thankful for her support, inviting her to dinner. Trina wanted to know why Jordan was there. Trina inquired about Jordan's reason for being there, to which Jordan responded that she was looking for art for her new apartment. Trina graciously led Jordan to see some oils, and Marco left, leaving Sidwell to suggest to Ava that Lucas moving in with Marco might help mend effects with Carly. Plus, it could ultimately bring peace with Sonny. Ava advised peace with Carly might be futile. Ava advised that hoping for peace with Carly might be futile, but Sonny's mood would depend on whether he could keep his peers. Lucas arrived, and Sidwell stepped down to allow them to talk. Lucas expressed his gratefulness to Ava for believing in his capability to manage his own life. And she realized he'd informed Carly, who replied as anticipated. Lucas also embraced his aunt in a thankful clinch. Trina brazened Jordan. Once Trina had Jordan by herself, she brazened her father's partner for snooping in her parents' marriage and causing their divorce. When Jordan refocused out that Portia had obviously involved herself in this situation, Trina advised her against mentioning her mama and claimed that she understood the verity on her own. Rick Lansing arrived at the police station to meet acting district attorney Justine Turner. Justine was taken suddenly that he was representing Rocco, especially when Rick mentioned that Sonny had tete-a-tete requested him. When she tried to negotiate a deal for a time of community service, Rick chortled and proposed 2 months rather. She advised that Rocco might face charges for breaking and entering, but he stressed the weakness of her case, egging her to revise her offer to 6 months. Also, Britt Westbourne hastened into the station to bandy Rocco with the manager. Britt noticed Dalton talking to Turner after learning from Nathan West that Dante Falconeri was the acting police manager. She assumed he'd put a stop to everything. Nathan reminded his family that Dante couldn't show favoritism to his son, but as a minor, Rocco would presumably just admit a light discipline. Britt asked Nathan to keep an eye on Rocco. As they left for the center together, Britt stopped when she noticed Professor Henry Dalton arriving to speak with Justine. Lulu and Sonny talked about Rocco's charges at Sonny's house. Lulu Spencer raised her worries about Rick representing her son, but Sonny comforted her that despite his excrescencies, his family was a great counsel. Lulu was confused about how everything unfolded and where the notion that Dalton was involved in illegal beast testing came from, but she felt proud of Rocco for standing up for his family and family. Outdoors, Gio Palmieri expressed remorse for not being suitable to help, but Rocco understood and didn't want anyone differently to face trouble with him. He told Gio that as a minor, he'd probably just admit community service and would be okay. Back at the house, Rocco embraced Gio before going to court with Lulu and Sonny. Gio and Emma came to a big decision. Gio and Emma Scorpio Drake made an important choice. Emma visited Gio to see how he was doing, and he confessed he felt anxious because he wanted to help but felt helpless. Emma comforted him that Ned Quartermain was entering excellent care at the sanitarium, and stepping in to help Rocco would only lead to trouble for him too. So my little family gets in trouble, Gio complained, and I doan't indeed try to take my part of the blame. I doan't know if I can handle that. Emma told Gio it was Enta's responsibility. It was on her. Emma told him it was Enta's responsibility. It was hers since she initiated this whole fight against Dalton. Gio combated that while she might have been incorrect about the creatures, she was right to go after Dalton because he's a bad person. He expressed his plan to tell Lulu and Dante the verity about what happened but promised to keep Emma's name out of it. She reminded him that they're supposed to face this together. Also she claimed that if he wants to be honest, they should do it as a platoon. Laura showed up for Rocco's arraignment. Laura Collins encountered Dante at the courthouse, and he advised her not to stay for Rocco's censure, concerned that her being there might negatively impact her mayoral election chances. Laura stated that although she cherished her job, family comes first. Dante contended that the megacity requires her and she should imperil the election by being beside Sunny in court. Laura felt relieved to learn that the charges had been reduced to a misdemeanor, but she was anxious about how Rocco would reply if she wasn't present for her grandson. Lulu and Rocco came with Sunny. Lulu and Rocco showed up at the courthouse with Sunny. Rick spoke with them and said he'd made a deal with Justine, telling Rocco to follow his illustration and assuring him that everything would be okay. As Rocco walked into the courtroom, he felt happy that his family was there to support him, but Lulu wasn't happy to see Britt. The teenager was especially thankful to see his grandma, and Laura mentioned she wouldn't want to be anywhere differently. Sunny offered to switch seats, but Laura told him she didn't want to hide their fellowship. Justine took back the plea bargain. Britt was taken suddenly when Marco sat beside her, and he said he was there to give Diane Miller a complete update on the proceedings. The judge opened the court session, but as Rick began to bandy the plea deal they had arranged, Justine intruded to say it was no longer an option due to changes in circumstances. She bared that Rocco was now facing charges for destroying personal information. Also, there were dangerous accoutrements that could have led to losses on lot if they had been released during his vandalization of the lab. The courtroom was filled with shock as Rick asked for a detention, but the judge stated he could review the new substantiation before the trial. Laura leaned over to Sunny and mentioned that Rocco no way defaced the lab since Dalton hadn't mentioned anything about it back also, and he concurred that commodity sounded off. Due to the serious charges, the judge decided Rocco would go to trial and stay in guardianship until his bail hail. Rick asked to set bail incontinently, but the judge said it would be in 2 days. And worried Rocco cried that he no way touched anything in the lab, while Dante and Lulu tried to console him. After leaving court, Marco called Sidwell to say it was over and worse than we stressed, as Laura leaned towards the toughie to say, "Our grandson's been framed." In the sprawling, interconnected universe of Port Charles, crises are rarely contained. They ripple outward, touching every life in their path, turning personal despair into public spectacle and private guilt into a catalyst for war. The fate of one teenager, Rocco Falconeri, had become precisely this kind of seismic event, a fault line that was cracking open to reveal the city's deepest fissures, between law and justice, between political ambition and familial love, and between the desire for peace and the instinct for vengeance. The crucible of the courthouse, a grandmother's fury and a lawyer's gambit. The Port Charles courthouse was never just a building of law, it was a theater of human drama, and on this day, the performance was a tragedy. The air in the hallway was thick with the scent of old wood, anxiety, and the faint, metallic tang of the media's cameras. Laura Collins, the mayor, stood at the center of a swirling storm of reporters, their microphones thrust forward like weapons. She had just witnessed her grandson, Rocco, remanded into custody on fabricated charges, and the carefully constructed facade of the polished politician had been utterly annihilated. Her gaze, sharp enough to cut glass, locked onto Professor Henry Hank Dalton, who was watching the scene with a smug, self-satisfied detachment. The memory of his testimony, the lies about destroyed proprietary data and hazardous materials, replayed in her mind, each word a deliberate poison. My response? Laura's voice, usually an instrument of measured diplomacy, rang out, sharp and clear, a mother's roar cutting through the journalistic cacophony. My response is that this man is a liar. The flashbulbs erupted in a frenzied strobe. This was the soundbite that would lead every news cycle. He has stood in this hall of justice and perpetrated a gross fraud, she continued, her finger pointing accusatorily. He is using the legal system as a cudgel to attack a child for his own malicious, political ends, and I will not stand by and allow it. It was a spectacular, career-jeopardizing meltdown. In that moment, she wasn't Mayor Collins, she was Nana Laura, a lioness publicly eviscerating a hunter who had threatened her cub. The political ramifications would be severe, but in the raw, emotional aftermath of the courtroom betrayal, she found she didn't care. The system had failed her family, and she would burn it down herself if she had to. Inside the now empty courtroom, the echoes of the gavel still seemed to hang in the air. Rick Lansing packed his briefcase, the pleasant confidence of his brokered plea deal now ash in his mouth. He had been outmaneuvered, and he knew it. ADA Justine Turner's last-minute ambush, clearly orchestrated by Dalton, was a professional insult. But for Rick, this case was more than professional. It was a direct request from his brother, Sonny, a fragile olive branch in their perpetually fractured relationship. Failing Sonny, and by extension, failing his nephew Rocco, was not an option. This sense of being outgunned led him to the office of Alexis Davis. He found her surrounded by the legal detritus of another seemingly hopeless case, Willow Tate's defense. Tough day? Rick asked, leaning against the doorframe, his tone deceptively casual. Alexis looked up, her expression one of weary suspicion. You could say that. I see your day didn't go much better. They're railroading that boy, Alexis, Rick stated, his voice losing its lightness. Just like they're setting up your client. The game is rigged. The DA's office, powerful men like Dalton, they're playing chess, and we're trying to fight them with checkers. He paused, letting the observation settle in the space between them, a space filled with years of complicated history, mutual respect, and profound mistrust. I'm trying to make peace with Sonny. To do right by my family. He met her gaze squarely. I'm suggesting that maybe you and I should do the same. Join forces. Pool our resources. Two against the world has a better ring to it than one. The proposition was audacious, dangerous, and morally ambiguous. But as Alexis looked at Rick, remembering the man who had risked himself in a hostage crisis, and considered the Goliaths arrayed against both her and Willow, a forbidden thought took root. Perhaps, in a war with no rules, you needed a soldier who wasn't afraid to fight dirty. The burden of blame, a son's anguish and a doctor's rage. While the public drama unfolded at the courthouse, a more private agony was consuming Giovanni Palmieri. The guilt was a physical presence, a leaden weight in his chest that made every breath a struggle. He found his birth mother, Brooke Lynn Quartermaine, in the quiet opulence of the Quartermaine mansion, a stark contrast to the turmoil in his soul. Brooke Lynn, he began, his voice cracking under the strain. I have to tell you something. About Rocco, it's my fault. The confession poured out of him, the rumors about Dalton's lab, the shared sense of righteous indignation, the fateful decision to use the stolen key fob. He only went in there because of me. He took the lead to protect the rest of us. And now he's in a cell, and I'm here. I have to confess. I have to tell the police everything. Brooke Lynn listened, her heart breaking for this young man who carried the world on his shoulders. She saw the ghost of his father's honor in his tormented eyes. Reaching out, she pulled him into a firm, grounding embrace. Gio, no. Look at me, she said, her voice soft but unwavering. Throwing yourself on the sword doesn't get Rocco out of the cage. It just puts you in the one next to him. What happened in that courtroom today wasn't about a teenager breaking a window. This was a targeted strike. We need to be strategic, not just sacrificial. Her words were a comfort, but they couldn't completely absolve him. His guilt was a shared burden, one he carried with Emma Scorpio Drake. Earlier, she had found him, a portrait of despair. I can't live with this, Emma, he had confessed, his hands clenched into fists. I'm going to tell Lulu and Dante the whole story. I'll make sure they know you had nothing to do with it. Emma, her own conscience equally burdened, would have none of it. Her loyalty was as fierce as her sense of justice. No. We did this together, Gio. All of it. If you confess, I confess. We face this together. She took his hand, her touch a tangible promise of solidarity. In their shared vulnerability, their bond deepened, transforming from a sweet romance into a partnership forged in fire. This very partnership, however, had drawn the ire of Britt Westbourne. Reeling from the courtroom's injustice and feeling her own culpability for providing the access, Britt sought a target for her fury. She found it in the hospital corridor, cornering Emma with the intensity of a predator. "You," Britt seethed, her hand snapping out to grip Emma's arm with a strength that belied her doctor's hands. "Let go of me," Emma demanded, trying to wrench her arm free. "Not until we get a few things straight," Britt hissed, her eyes blazing. "Your little amateur detective act, your noble crusade, look where it's gotten us. Rocco is facing prison because you couldn't leave well enough alone. You stole from me, you dragged my name into your mess, and now a good kid's future is in ruins because of your self-righteousness." Britt's anger was a volatile cocktail of genuine concern for Rocco and a frantic desire to protect the tenuous second chance she was building at the hospital. Emma, in her mind, was the spark that had ignited this conflagration, and she was determined to make her feel the heat. Desperate measures, a mother's plea and fractured families. As the legal wheels began to grind, desperation took root in a mother's heart. Lulu Spencer, the image of her son being led away in handcuffs burned into her mind, turned to the one person in Port Charles known for achieving the impossible through unorthodox means, Carly Spencer. She found Carly at Kelly's, the familiar diner, a backdrop for their shared history of conflict and camaraderie. "Carly, I need your help," Lulu pleaded, her voice raw. "It's Rocco. The charges, they're felonies. He could go away for years. You have ways of making problems disappear. You have connections. Please." Carly, a mother who had moved heaven and earth for her own children, saw the primal terror in Lulu's eyes. It was a language she understood perfectly. "Lulu, take a breath. Rick is a good lawyer. He'll find a way. The law isn't working." Lulu cried, her composure shattering. "This is a frame-up. We need something the law can't provide. We need leverage. We need. I don't know what we need, but you do. I'm begging you." The unspoken name hung in the air between them, Jack Brennan. Carly's personal fixer, a man who operated in the shadows. Would Lulu dare ask Carly to call in such a dangerous favor? And would Carly, understanding the stakes were a child's future, be willing to cross that line? This familial desperation was mirrored across the city, in the more domestic but no less painful fractures of the Ashford-Robinson marriage. In Portia's office, a tense conversation was unfolding. Curtis, after a forceful nudge from his Aunt Stella, had come to talk. "Stella thinks, well, she helped me see things differently," Curtis began, his words careful and measured. "About the baby. About us." Portia watched him, her hope a fragile, fluttering thing. "What are you saying, Curtis? Are you suggesting we stay together for the baby?" The question was laden with a profound sadness, the yearning for her family to be whole, warring with the fear of a marriage sustained only by obligation, forever shadowed by his unresolved connection to Jordan Ashford. This complex web of relationships was further tangled by Trina Robinson's protective fury. At the gallery, she cornered Jordan, her father's ex-lover, her eyes flashing with indignation. "Why are you really here?" Trina challenged, her voice cold. "I'm looking for art for my new apartment," Jordan replied, her tone even, but her guard visibly up. "My parents are divorcing because of you," Trina accused, bypassing all pleasantries. "You inserted yourself into their marriage and broke it." When Jordan pointed out that Portia had her own secrets, Trina cut her off. "Don't you dare talk about my mother. I know what I saw. And I will make sure my father never makes the mistake of going back to you." The battle lines were drawn, not in a courtroom, but in an art gallery, with a daughter's love as the ultimate weapon. The unraveling, a brother's choice and a mobster's concern. The day's tensions had even seeped into the sanctuary of Bobby's, where a different family conflict had erupted. Lucas Jones's announcement that he was moving in with Marco Rios, into the lion's den of Windmere, no less, had sparked a furious confrontation with his sister, Carly. "You can't be serious, Lucas," Carly had exclaimed, her initial support evaporating. "Jen Sidwell is a terrorist. He blew up a pub. He's a threat to everyone we care about." Lucas, feeling patronized and misunderstood, stood his ground. "There's no evidence of that. And this is my life, my choice. Marco and I love each other. This is a step for us." The argument escalated, with Carly comparing Sidwell to Sonny, a comparison that only ignited her fury further. "Don't you dare. My brother is trying to prove he's changed. Sidwell is trying to prove he can get away with anything. At best, Marco is naive. At worst, he's using you for your connections to us." Jocelyn Jacks, attempting to play peacemaker, tried to calm her mother. "Mom, he's an adult. He has the right to make his own choices, even if they're mistakes." But Carly, feeling betrayed on all sides, was inconsolable. Lucas, deeply hurt, had left with a final, sharp remark. "Don't worry, sis. You don't have to visit. And I don't need your approval to be happy." The fallout from this schism rippled outward. At the gallery, Lucas found a sympathetic ear in Ava Jerome, grateful for her unwavering support in the face of his sister's disapproval. Meanwhile, Jen Sidwell, ever the strategist, saw Lucas's move as a potential bridge to peace with the powerful Corinthos family, a bridge Ava warned him was likely a bridge to nowhere where Carly was concerned. Even Sonny Corinthos, the city's most formidable power broker, found himself outmaneuvered. As he stood beside Laura outside the courthouse, the political and the personal had collided with devastating force. His money, his influence, his threats, all were useless against the cold, impartial, and corrupted machinery of the law. Laura's whispered words, "Our grandson's been framed," were not just a statement of fact, but a silent indictment of his own limitations. He had promised his family protection, and in this moment, he had failed.